Thank you very much for setting the context. We have a very eminent set of people who are experts in their respective areas, and we are going to discuss a very important topic, which is zero trust. And after the onset of the pandemic, which we all weathered, we understand its importance, right? The number of cybersecurity attacks throughout the world has sort of explosion, and therefore there's an utmost importance on placing zero trust as the way of working across organizations. As the world evolves, so do the threats, and therefore business resilience will take you far. So I'll take some thoughts from the eminent panelists and would like to understand what their thoughts around these topics are. So first with the lady, Chanchal, I want to know what are the core principles of zero trust and how organizations can effectively implement this model in a rapidly evolving threat landscape. Every day the threat vectors are increasing. Every day the number of connected devices and attack surfaces are increasing. So in such a scenario, what is the core principle that one should keep in mind from the zero trust perspective, and what are your thoughts around it?
Absolutely. Thanks, Piyush, and thank you everyone for your time. Again, I would like to start that zero trust was a buzzword 4 years back, okay, and it has now become a mandate, right? Because we more often than not talk about adopting zero trust framework, which is actually built on the NIST framework, right? Now, when you talk about the core principles, it's about trusting no one, right? Authenticating and ensuring that you go ahead and, evaluate the identity of the user who's trying to access the content, and also sort of restrict that user to only that particular application at any given point in time, right? So my first principle, the first core principle would be eliminating that implicit trust that you have on anybody, right? Secondly, irrespective of where your user is coming from, who your user is, the kind of connectivity your user has, be it SD-WAN, be it IPsec, etc. You don't want to trust that user. So it's based on least privileges. So that's the second core principle, right? Last but not the least, we also talk a lot about contextualizing the user. Say I'm a road warrior, right? I end up being on the road more often, and there are multiple locations that I end up visiting in a day, or say 10 different locations in a month. So that's a context that's associated to me versus somebody who's sitting inside the office and just pretty much having access to say 2 or 3 applications bare minimum, right? So that context based awareness is something that's super important, because while you give access, while you start with the zero trust principles, you verify the identity, but what you also need to keep in mind is how dynamically would the context change, right? You could also, say you've, somehow given access to an attacker, but the context changes. So do you have on the fly capabilities to ensure that, you can restrict access, or, just revoke the access for that matter, right? So those are some of the core principles that we advocate and I am part of Zscaler. So we've been talking about, and you would have heard a gentleman present what Zscaler does, and we work on this particular, we've built our logic on this particular platform.
Yes, would you like to augment to what Chanchal said? There's a concept of micro-segmentation without which the zero trust won't work. So would you like to bring in some technical aspects from that angle as to why it's important, and how should organizations be curious and should be careful while implementing the zero trust principle?
Thanks for the opportunity to talk here. When it comes to a technical aspect, like we were mentioning, what can we do to implement zero trust? Implementing zero trust is one part. The bigger problem is sustaining it. I am zero trust compliant today. How do I stay compliant with zero trust 4 weeks later? I onboard 10 new developers, I onboard a new salesperson, I onboard technical people. How do I ensure that zero trust does not cannibalize my productivity? I have a production issue on a different project which an tech expert, my developer, is not have access to. Should I not give him that access, him or her that access? Do I wait for that project team to upscale? What is the business loss I'm anticipating with that? If I do give an access, does that access stay perpetual? When do I revoke it? How do I time box this? The answer is vigilance. Yes, technologies are available that will flag a developer from X project has access to Y database, should not be having, do something. But there is no real substitute for vigilance when it comes to zero trust. Getting there is one base. Staying there without compromising on productivity, that is the piece that we need to balance.
Great. So, if Gartner predictions are to be believed, Gartner says 70% of the remote deployments are going to rely on zero trust network access going forward. And remote work and hybrid is something which is the reality now. You just can't avoid it. So my question to you, Bimal, is that how does zero trust addresses these challenges, and what are the key considerations for securing distributed networks? I repeat the question. How does zero trust address the challenges which are posed by the remote work and hybrid work environments, and what are the key considerations for securing these distributed networks?
I think most critical thing is that security, the way it was achieved earlier, has entirely changed because of the perimeter has gone, and people are accessing the assets from outside. And not only that, the assets are also outside now, because you may be putting a lot of stuff not only in private cloud but also in public cloud and all that. To achieve the security, we need to have the identity management. It should be very strong, and identity management not only just the identity of the person, but also the way it has to be contextualized. Same person, when they look into the office documents or enterprise assets from the office hours, from the office, versus when the person is outside, or person from home network, or person from different other network, or person from different geographies. All these things needs to be dynamically contextualized, and accordingly the policy should be adopted so that it can be, access should be provided and all that. Not only that, interestingly, we have seen that at a lower level, at the implementation level, at the devices level also, a lot of developments are happening in the last 5-6 years. Trusted zone or trusted execution zone is provided by ARM processor, which mostly we are using the processors, we are using our mobile phone. So the endpoint security is getting stronger and stronger, whether it is Intel-based processor as well as whether it is RISC-V processors and all. So overall, I will say that with all these things coming into the place, our ability to manage security in this dynamic environment is also getting much strengthened now.
Sure. Krishnamurthy sir, I want to take your thoughts, because your organizations works with more of devices rather than less of humans. So what are your thoughts? How do you ensure that in an environment of distributed networks and cloud environment, how does your organization ensure that the principle of zero trust is not just on page or on a paper, how it gets implemented across all the kind of bots and devices that you have? How do you ensure the OT security part of it?
Thanks Piyush, and thanks ObserveNow for giving this opportunity and one of that very pertinent topic of zero trust. Before answering to your question, I would like to just point out one thing. First, let's understand what is zero trust. Zero trust, by name itself, it says don't trust anyone, and you need to give a specific access or the authority to do or execute certain things. In today's world where things are moving from on-premises to cloud and from office to work from home, you never know who is coming in, at what time he is coming in, what he is doing. On top of it, in today's segmentations of security, if you see, the major challenge is towards the human psychological behavior, which is very important. We used to call it saying that there is a threat which happens because of the malware, there is a threat which is happening because of certain user credential bypass or whatever you can call it. But in today's world where there is a lot of turmoils happening in geopolitical situations, so you never know who is the visitor who is trying to access it and what he is trying to do. So if you talk about from an endpoint, and all these things are happening from the endpoint, so to control that, you need to ensure that the endpoint is protected. So at the same time, you also need to give an agility that they can keep doing the work as and when they want, or whatever they want to go ahead and do it. For that, user behavior analysis is paramount if you talk from a technology perspective, apart from doing other controlling. In the last session, I had gentlemen talked about east-west traffic. We talked about lateral movement of network. We talked about a lot of things. So probably we need to have a technology and a concept which can support or help to mitigate it at the first level. On top of it, you can start building a ACL, you can start building authority, you can start building whatever you want to come up. Answering to your questions, so currently our environment, we are into autonomous robotic solutions with warehouse fulfillment based out in Atlanta. So our workflows are spread across different geographic locations across the globe. Our customers are from different geography. We are purely into IoT, we are into AI space, and we are also talking about interconnected scenarios. So in this scenario, what is more important is we need to ensure that whatever data is being collected from the point of IoT till a point where my AI ML algorithm is running or maybe edge is running, it's been protected. That's number one. That is from an operational angle. But from a human psychological perspective, there is someone who is creating or who is doing those activity in terms of either coding or in terms of creating a data sets and so on and so forth. That also needs to be protected. So from that angle, if you see, the zero trust is a paramount from an angle of ensuring the first line of defense is created, so you know who is coming. Today, if a user who is supposed to be logging in from India, suddenly he is trying to log in from say China. So is it a threat for me? Answer is yes. Suppose a person who is trying to work from 9 to 5, suddenly he started working at 9 o'clock. Is it a threat? Maybe he need to put it into a watch list because he can be a potential threat in the near future. Because most of the time what happens is that leakage or threat is from the insider. Attack can be stopped, but anything which is internal, and if a breach is there, you can react to a breach, but you cannot stop a breach. From a proactive perspective, the zero trust can also come into a major role into it. We have adopted a zero trust wherein we have ensured all our endpoints are not only protected, but also we know or we do a UBA analysis of the users across the globe, which is further supported by a state-of-the-art XDR, SOC, so on and so forth, whatever we can call it. But the baseline is zero trust. I hope that I answered your question.
Yeah, wonderful insight. I want to pick up a thought which you mentioned about UB. So picking up from user analytics and AI are actually the technologies which can really strengthen the cybersecurity posture, and which is where my next question to Satya is, you're representing PhonePe, and PhonePe, as we know, are the sort of leaders in digital payments, right? I want to take your thoughts that how does continuous monitoring play a role in identifying and mitigating the threats, which could be external or insider threats, and how can organizations uplift these technologies in enhancing zero trust architecture?
First of all, thanks for having me here. I'll take two examples. I think some of my fellow panelists have touched upon that. So at PhonePe, we have a very huge workforce which goes out and acquires merchants in real time. So they go out day in, day out, and they are again all remotely located. They need access to data which is very pertinent for them to identify a merchant, do certain validations, and all of that needs to happen with the lowest latencies possible, right? So there would be a lot of government APIs that we need to hit for validations. For example, I'm collecting your PAN documentation from which I need to do validations. I need to learn. I need to do payment validations by reaching out to your bank, etc. So all of this needs to happen remotely. A lot of these workforce guys now, because they have access to some of these, there could be misuse, and that's where you need to have a great monitoring around when and how they are accessing these, what are they doing actually, what activities they are performing on. So some of these are done through the apps that we give to these guys, so a lot of monitoring is built on that. So you are assigned to a particular territory, are you acting 500 kilometers away from there, do I have a way to know where you are acting, what you are acting upon. A lot of these. The other aspect I was trying to bring out, we also have another view where we have 500 million plus customers who also again interact with us on various things through our app. So a lot of behavior that we know on the identity front needs to be monitored day in, day out. So if, for example, I see you do some activity in terms of you trying to log in through a device which I know is inherently bad because of the past behavior, how do I use that intelligence and how do I use that in real time to prevent that from happening. So from that standpoint, I think it does fall upon us to have a very robust system which can do a lot of evaluations in real time, and that's what we strive for, to have very quick response systems for any incident that is getting detected. And that's where I think the constant struggle is on how do we implement a zero trust architecture, but also not compromise on latency. How do we keep our incident responses very fast? We are also heavily regulated, so a lot of regulatory obligations also are there which mandate us to do things in the eventuality ABC. How do we respond to those? So that's where I think balance needs to be created for us to work smoothly in the customer.
Are you really using the power of AI in some of these analytics and monitoring, or they are still into the POC stage? Because most of the organizations we converse with, it is still in the POC stage. Many organizations have not really adopted the real use case of AI. So how is it going there at PhonePe?
So I would say we are fairly into the space where we are very actively using the power of ML and AI to predict the behavior of the user and merchant who is interacting with us, and that's for the payment space. For other newer spaces that we are getting into, we are slowly also deploying whatever learnings we had from our very huge payments related experience and how we implement those in the newer lines of businesses that we are getting into. So if I talk about payments, we heavily rely on what you do behaviorally. We have a huge knowledge store which kind of keeps on powering learning from what you do day on day. Obviously a lot of this is protected behind layers and layers of protection, accesses are controlled. So, but if I talk about how do we treat cybersecurity and fraud prevention related things, that's where we heavily rely on these AI capabilities for us to predict a lot of bad behavior related things. So our safety of the end user is something that we prioritize over everything else.
Dr. Sashank, I want to take your thoughts around this, because you are sort of multi-hatting. You are a single person and wearing 3 hats of being a CTO, being a CISO, and being a co-founder.
Yeah.
And at times we notice that there are conflicting priorities. Right?
Absolutely.
CTO has to be worried about the tech development. As a CISO, you have to be cautious about that your product is 100% secure. At the same time, being a co-founder, you're worried that your business is running every day, right?
Absolutely.
So I want to understand that with advent of the sophistication in technology, user analytics, AI, how are you sort of incorporating these technologies into the products and services that you offer? And how do you handle this workforce?
So, wonderful question. Thank you for asking that. Right. So definitely, it's quite a challenging game. Looking the problem from multiple dimensions. Right. The first one, what I could think of is that what is that we are building? That's absolutely important when we have to protect it. So we are building this cutting-edge AI native risk and compliance SaaS product, right? That's the CTO hat if I wear. How do I build this technology that has extremely sensitive information of our customers, right? We need to build the technology for that. The second one is I need to wear a hat of CISO in order to protect and have enough controls that this data that we are collecting, it could be metadata, from a regulatory and compliance perspective is safe and well protected, right? And as a co-founder, as you said, we need to keep the business on, we need to keep it running. Now, at the heart of it, it is always about do not trust, right? That's the foundation of zero trust, right? When you build the technology itself, what kind of a trust you need to provide and to whom, right? Can the customers of one customer's tenant, can they peep into the data of others? Can the users, the auditors who are logging into the portal, do they get accidental access to other customer data? So all these scenarios we need to run through our mind and put it in our architecture, and everything we build grounds up, we need to ensure that the data access, network infra, everything is well protected, right? And now comes the AI angle to it. Now how do we provide access to AI solutions out there in a cloud native way, still keeping the data in India, in the data centers, so that we are respecting or adhering to the regional laws, right? It's definitely quite a challenging aspect, but ensuring from grounds up that all these zero trust principles in all the dimensions of identify, protect, detect, remediate or respond and recover, that we need to ensure that these principles are followed and implemented.
Next question to you, Suresh. Since you're representing PayU, I want to take your thoughts that while implementing these zero trust principle in the organization, what are the most common challenges which are faced, and do you think these challenges can be overcome by a strategic thought process put up in place, and how do we ensure that the right technology investments are put in place so that the underlying philosophy remains intact?
Guys, you can hear me, right? Sure? The back guys? Okay, thanks. Well, you know, this is a question which is running in circles. Okay. So my business is a fintech business, right? So those who know PayU, we act as a vehicle moving money from PhonePe or any pay to some other bank. What is the point? The point is, if we don't know the business, whatever we are going to do, beating around this word as much as and make it a bunch out of it, does not make any difference. That's the biggest piece, right? For us, all of you guys are users. I am the user, right? So what is the first thing which we started doing is, before even we thought of doing the zero trust thought process and everything, we started studying ourselves, we started studying our business, and we understood that, you know what, hey, we ourselves have to make ourselves more resilient and prepared for the business. And that was the biggest challenge. If somebody does not know the business of what kind of ZTNA he is going to invest, I'm quite sure it's never going to work. So, yeah, teaching, number one, culture, second, the same recipe, folks. There is nothing different. I mean, it's not going to change. So what we did, we changed a few things. We started making people accountable. If you see, now even banks are doing the same thing. What are they doing? Or even the fraud callers. Oh, by the way, how many of you guys actually got a fraud calls from for your courier, that your courier stuck? And how many of you guys are actually got into that trap? Oh no, guys. I can't believe it.
Nobody will raise the hand.
So fantastic. You are the brave man. So basically, they made 300 crores by now. You know that, right? That is the level of fraud which has happened. What are we doing with ZTNA? If I am protected and you are not, definitely my business is not going to be, at profit. So what we did, we actually started doing in the reverse order. Even if we have all of them saying they are actually correct. But the biggest problem is you guys have to be protected first, and that is the only thing we did. So what we do, we actually ask you guys, don't trust people, don't trust the telecallers, right? So that's a culture which we are trying to bring in, an ecosystem. Yep. Everything else is technology, folks. Like it can handle itself.
Bimal, your thoughts, because the demographics of the workforce are changing, right? It is more of Gen Z, and we are nearing our retirement age. So, do you think that Gen Z take a very different view about zero trust principle, that if the organization doesn't have a trust on me, am I really required? Does that create any kind of friction between the technology and human interface?
I crossed 60 actually, I'm 61 years. So definitely I crossed the retirement age also.
So you are a Gen Z now.
But very interesting questions. But I have seen in the work environment, those Gen Z and generation changes and all that. I always feel that there are different groups of people always exist in the system. People who are very enthusiastic about the work, and then they goes any length to understand the work, and one is that group of people. There will be a large number of also the other group of people always exist actually, that people who would like to see work as their part of life, but they don't see that that the work is the life. They don't look at it. They look work as part of their life, and they would like to enjoy the different other parts and all that. Coming to this question that whether Gen Z, whether they see this zero trust, will it impact their work? I think it is not actually, because I think Gen Z, they are also growing up in that kind of an environment where they are much smarter. They understand this the example of fraud, what the FedEx fraud. So they understand all those things much better. So they also understand the technology much easily and much better. So I think they are able to adapt to this situation much better. If we don't allow that, for example, in the earlier days, we have to have only with our office computer, only we need to do the work. We cannot connect with our mobile phone, which is available, which in our time it was not existing. If we put those restrictions, then it will create more hassles, more trouble for the people. So I think that way the technology is also evolving with the perspective of the Gen Z, what they are looking for. That's what is my thought.
Sure. Good thought of angle from what you shared. Now that brings me to another aspect, which is around compliances. So Chanchal, I would first want to understand from you that how's this entire principle of zero trust architecture actually aligns with our current and emerging cybersecurity regulations, and to ensure compliance, what should be the best practices organizations should follow to ensure that they are compliant as well as they are actually deriving the utmost benefit of the zero trust architecture?
Sure, Piyush. So that's an excellent question. In fact, some of us spoke about sustainability, some of us spoke about how important it is for us to secure our internal network, right? Because the employees or people who are part of the organization could be a threat, right? So when we talk so much about compliance, and because this is this is a digital native space, and most of us are evolving, most of us are cloud born, and with that comes a lot of regulations and compliance that you need to adhere to, right? So I have conversations with customers who talk about SEBI, who talk about DPDP, because it's super critical for their business, right? We have the likes of PhonePe here, where NPCI becomes a super critical thing for them, right? So if we were to sort of ensure that while we are focusing on data leak protection, okay, we are talking about ensuring our connectivity is secure, we are ensuring that, hey, we've sort of moved away from a perimeter-based security to something, pertaining to zero trust. It's also important that you have to adhere with regulation. It's super important because cybersecurity is now built on it. You're having transactions online, and that is where compliance becomes a key. And Zscaler understands that. And the very first meeting, you will not believe, the very first meeting we end up having with any customer or prospect of ours, the first question is how compliance heavy are you? Will you be able to adhere or sort of adapt to how our company is structured from the regulation or the governance standpoint? So yeah, so that's the key. And that's the reason, you know, when we talk about data protection, we also talk about a lot of governance that is in place, right? We sort of tailor-make our compliance story specific to the industry we are talking to, right? Compliance for an e-commerce is going to be very different from compliance for a fintech organization, or compliance for an OTT for that matter, or somebody who's in gambling, right? Legal or ethical gambling, so be. So yeah, so the story there is super strong, and I think it's important because the transactions are happening online. Your money is, you know, online, all the transactions are happening online, and at the same time, there's just so much. Your intellectual property is all on the cloud, so compliance definitely becomes a key.
So Suresh and Satya, I understand that your businesses are the ones which are highly regulated, right? Because it deals with money, it deals with customer data. Do you think that you come across situations where you find it difficult to manage the conflicts which are arising out of compliance, as also ensuring that you are way ahead in the game, you are adopting the best practices and policies with respect to zero trust? And if there are any examples which you can quote, probably our audience will be highly benefited, that how to handle such situations where you have to ensure compliance as well, whereas you also have a conflict which is arising because of the new technology and its adoption, especially from the zero trust perspective.
I wouldn't say conflicts, but yes, some of the compliances are difficult to comply with. You end up evaluating situations where you are creating friction for your end user because you have to comply with. But again, because you are in a regulated space, there is hardly any room for you to not comply with regulations, and hence technology becomes your partner in easing out some of these frictions. So examples could be if you have to collect and store data and there is a regulation on how do you handle that data, who accesses this data, what actions can be taken on that data. So you need to have a very strong governance structure around that, access-based controls. Only the need-based information goes out or in from these systems. Wherever possible, you then create structures which are modular in nature so that one system interacts with another, but then again, the exchange is only limited to what that particular activity is for. I was touching upon earlier on KYC verification or financial information verification. So these are again modules which are very tech heavy, and then there you can build structures which then don't create that obligation for you to have a seamless access of information from a single point of entry. So that's how we think of these problems, and we try to compartmentalize and then ensure that technology helps us traverse through these compartments easily, while we are ensuring that we are compliant, and we also then protect information very closely. So that's the approach that we usually end up taking, and hence, and that's where I said, because if you end up building all of these come at a cost. So these are not easy decisions at times to make, but again, if it is required, it is required, and that's how we do it.
Suresh, your thoughts, and if you can touch upon that, what is the role the entire ecosystem plays? Because you are always not a business in isolation, right? There is a ecosystem of suppliers, partners and vendors. While you might be best of the world in terms of having all these fundamentals in place, how do you ensure that the supplier ecosystem are actually aligned with your philosophy? Because any breach happens at the remotest corner of one of your supplier's office will impact you, right? So what are your thoughts around this?
Yep. So guys, again, so he promised me 2 questions. Now he is asking 3 questions. Okay. How many of us actually have Maruti car? Volkswagen, Volvo, Mercedes? At least you can reason.
I don't have.
Okay. Guys, there is a philosophy in manufacturing. People, if given a choice between Volvo and Volkswagen, they will go for Volvo. given a choice between Volkswagen and Volvo and other companies, people usually say, you know what, this is the safest car in the world. Do you know why? The reason is pretty simple, and that is exactly the philosophy even if fintechs are not willingly but unwillingly, but yes, forcefully now we have to follow it. So first thing is, in Volvo car, everything is Volvo. Do you guys know about this or not? Even a screw is a Volvo branded. It is talked to the Volvo style, right? So in fintech, we follow following principles. Number one, zero tolerance to compliance. Number two, a risk-based approach. Now, what is risk-based and zero tolerance? Fundamentally, to answer your last question, vendors. We actually, don't deal with the vendors who have a dirty past. It can be any vendor. It can be an event vendor. So what we do, our vendor management system is a nightmare, believe me. So we have history of almost everything. Now I nowadays start calling it like a Janam Kundli of a vendor. So we know exactly how deep the vendor is, what is happening with this vendor, what he has done with your organization, why we want to have it. The reason is, of late, the vendors have become the source of the problems for regulators. So now, what happens with such things? Let's take an example of VKYC we talked about. So, let's say somebody else is doing my KYC and their employee is a criminal, correct? Who is at the fault? Is it the company of the company who has employed that person? Well, actually, you and PayU will be actually bleeding more because we hired that vendor, correct? So that means what we started doing is compliance at the first part of it and risk exactly immediately standing with it, picking off, okay, you are the vendor, give me your employee reports. Well, we don't have to do it. I mean, come on, if I work with Deloitte, I'll be forcing them to give the employee, criminal records. They might not like it, but that's the way of the life for fintech business. Yeah, I think that the another piece which is very critical for all of us is when we say what kind of vendor we are trying to deal with. I think we should have our own vendor inventory. We should rate our vendors, choice of vendors. My mom does it much better than companies. They exactly know who or which vegetable vendor is going to be giving the best vegetable. Come on, then we can actually do it better with AI or anything.
Sure.
Sorry.
The last comments which I want from the co-founders, that you have your clients apart from India also. There's a lot of digital transformation and adoption that has happened in India. Do you feel that the rules and regulations and the best practices are evolving more in the Asian region, especially leading by India? Are we on the right path to make India a superpower and a cyber surakshit Bharat? What are your thoughts, and how do you sort of adopt this philosophy while you are undertaking product development?
So probably I'll take that one because we are in that space. It's a very good question. In fact, just like 2 days back, there is this new circular from SEBI for all the SEBI regulated entities. Very wonderfully written, well-defined regulation in which everything is crystal clear, right? So the more clear, the less ambiguous the standard is, the much better it is for adoption, right? So this is one example, right? I mean, similarly, there is this RBI circulars, there is SEBI, the IRDA, extremely well written. These are, although the central philosophy could be from the NIST standards or whatever, but the way they have articulated and published it, and the way the enforcements are coming, we are definitely way ahead from many other geographies, I would say, right? So how do we make it easier for the product development? Yes, right from day one in the product development, if you know which domain you are in, whether it's fintech, whether it is insurance tech, whether it is health tech, if you are aware of what kind of standards and regulations are coming in, it's very, very important for baking in those controls right from day one. There's no, as he said zero tolerance for compliance. It takes you a long way, right? So that's what I can say.
Yes, your thoughts?
See, what we do is actually partner with not just Indian but companies all across the globe to protect their end consumers. Right? That's what AShield does. We're not here to protect the employees because there are a lot of already existing solutions, methods there. We look at the most vulnerable and the least educated folks in terms of cyber education. Today, we walk out of this room and we don't know the guys who are out here, right? Who would be serving us lunch. They don't know not to share OTP. They don't know don't share your PIN. How do we protect those? Protection of those in the real world has actually been driven through India because, and like we said on compliance, compliance is the first step, not the end goal. We need, as an industry, we need to educate the regulators. We do this because we see fintech frauds, we see financial frauds. We educate the likes of RBI, SEBI, all of them, and obviously the foreign regulators in terms of NIST and all the others. This needs to be a collective effort. Today we try to use it in an isolation and say, let the regulator do education. Education can take you only so far. We need to eliminate that. We need to go beyond compliance. Compliance is, in our view, the first step, not the last step. And India would be the pioneer in this because the amount of threat vectors that we see and the kind of protection, we need to protect a farmer out in Delhi, right, in the outskirts of Delhi. Very few countries have this challenge. I see India would be not just a leading but the pioneer of solving these problems as we go along.
Rightly said, the kind of dynamics that we enjoy here in India is vast, and if you have tested a POC in India, believe you me, it is going to be successful in any parts of the world. That brings us to the conclusion of this panel. Thank you very much for your insightful observations and thoughts. I'm sure that the audience must have found it worthwhile. Thank you very much for very patiently listening.